Well, this morning we're in our second week of a series that is designed to help prepare us for the coming birth of the Christ child. At the heart of our current worship series is that classic story by Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. And we're using that story in a couple ways. We're going to be using the book itself. And I encourage you, if you haven't read that recently, pick up a copy at the library, your favorite bookseller, and read along with us. We're basically doing a stave or a chapter each week between now and Christmas Eve. Remarkable book and very, very worth your time to revisit. And we're also going to be looking at the 1951 film version, one that I really, really enjoy. But it's amazing how, even though they're so similar in some ways, they are so very different. So I encourage you to read the book if you haven't, follow along on the movie if you want to. But the hope is that as we take this journey, we're going to discover that as Ebenezer Scrooge finds his redemption, we have an opportunity to find our own redemption. We began the journey last week, and what we learned last week is that on Christmas Eve, 7 years after his partner Jacob Marley died, the ghost of Jacob Marley comes back and visits Scrooge. And the purpose of his visit was to give him a warning, to say to him that, look, there's some things you need to change in your life while you still have time, because if you don't, you're going to spend an eternity suffering and filled with great remorse and wandering the world, wishing that you had done better. And then Marley tells him that he's going to be visited by 3 spirits. And the purpose of the visits of those 3 spirits is to reveal to Scrooge why he needs to change, but also give him some inspiration and some motivation to make those changes. Marley tells him that the first spirit is going to visit him when the clock strikes 1. And so that's where we're going to pick up this morning. And so let's watch and see what happens as the ghost of Christmas past shows up to visit Ebenezer Scrooge. Well, according to the book and the movie, the first place that the ghost of Christmas past takes Ebenezer Scrooge is to the place that he grew up, to his the place where he was a boy. And a couple things happen when Scrooge shows up there. The first is he immediately recognizes the place. But he doesn't just recognize it by sight. He recognizes it by smell. We're told that 1,000 smells crossed Ebenezer's nose, and with each of those 1,000 scents that came into his nose also came a memory. And as Ebenezer was reconnecting with this place of his childhood, this place that was so important to him, he saw some of his childhood friends running around and playing and wishing each other Merry Christmas. And it filled Ebenezer with such joy. The sights, the smells, the memories. It filled him with such joy that a tear formed in Ebenezer Scrooge's eye. And it fell down his cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of tremendous joy. And as he was watching his childhood friends connect with one another and share Christmas greetings with one another, his heart was filled with happiness and inspiration, and he just felt so wonderfully good. And yet he was surprised that he would feel that way. Because for Ebenezer Scrooge, Christmas was a humbug. He didn't like Christmas at all. And yet for some reason, as he was there in this memory of his childhood, all of these wonderful memories came flooding back into his brain. And he was just so filled with joy that he couldn't help himself but feel good. As I was thinking about this story and reading through it in preparation for this morning, I began to think about some of my own boyhood memories, especially those around Christmas time. And there are multiple memories that I carry from my childhood when it comes to the holidays, but there is one memory that rises above the rest of them for me. It was Christmas Eve, And my family, my mother and sister and I were visiting my grandparents in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was about 5 or 6 at the time, which would have meant that we had traveled from Amarillo, Texas, over to Tulsa, and the sun had set, and we had dinner, and it was dark, and the family tells me that we're going to go out to see the Christmas lights. We're going to take a ride, and we're going to go look at all the Christmas lights, and everybody's going to pile in the car, and we're going to get out, and we're going to go. And while that may sound like a good idea to you, for me, as a young boy, this was quite a bad idea because this was Christmas and I had a job that needed to be done. I needed to go to sleep because we know what happens when we go to sleep on Christmas Eve, right? And we know who won't come if we don't go to sleep on Christmas Eve, right? I needed to go to sleep. And adding to my need to go to sleep and worry that Santa might miss me because I was awake, I was worried that Santa wouldn't even know where I was because I was not at home. I was with Grandma and Grandpa, so I was pretty stressed. I don't remember a single Christmas light. Not a one. But what I do remember is that when we came home, Santa had come. He had already been there. He came while we were out looking at the Christmas lights. We walked into the house and there were all the presents around the tree. It was magical. And in the midst of all of those presents, there was one that was more special than all the rest. A full-on Dallas Cowboy uniform. Full on. Pants with pads, jersey, shoulder pad, helmet. I don't remember anything else I got. But oh, do I remember finally getting my Dallas Cowboy uniform. And as I went to bed that night, pretty sure in the uniform, maybe minus the shoulder pads and helmet, but honestly, I'm not so sure. I was about as happy as a young boy could be. Santa had come, and he had found me. And the magic of Christmas was so very real to me in that moment. At the same time, as clear as that memory is for me, there are parts of it that I can't fill in. I mentioned to you, I don't remember seeing a single Christmas light. I don't remember any of the other gifts. I don't remember what we had for dinner. I don't remember what happened after. There are so many parts of that story that I can't piece together. And that's kind of the way our memories work, right? It doesn't matter how powerful the memory is, how strong the memory is. When we try to revisit those memories of our past, sometimes they're like the shadows of memory that Ebenezer Scrooge visited in his past. He could see them, but they couldn't see him. And yet, even though he could see them, there was a distance and he couldn't fully connect with them. And I love the way that Charles Dickens describes even the ghost of Christmas past. When the ghost of Christmas past in the book shows up and Ebenezer sees him for the first time, there's a very clear form that the ghost takes. But even as Ebenezer keeps his eyes on the ghost of Christmas past, it shifts. Its form changes. It was what it was, and then it's something different, and then it's back to what it was again, and then it's something different, and it's always shifting, always changing. He can't quite see it for what it is. Not only that, Dickens tells us that as the ghost was standing right next to Scrooge's bed and speaking to him, even though the voice was right next to him, it sounded as though it was far away, in the distance, in the past. And this is kind of the way memory works. This is kind of the way the stories of our past can feel to us. No matter how vivid they may be, there are things we can't fill in. No matter how vivid the memory might hold us, we can't quite hear it like we were actually there. It feels separated and distant and far past. We just can't quite connect to it. And yet, sometimes connecting to it is the most important thing that we can do in our journey. Ebenezer's journey with the ghost of Christmas past helped reveal a lot of things to him. The first thing that it revealed to him was that there was a time that Ebenezer Scrooge was filled with joy and happiness. Not only when he was a boy growing up, but also we learn that he had a sister and her name was Fan, and he absolutely adored her. And they were very, very close. His first job was with a man by the last name of Fezziwig. And Fezziwig was a wonderful, generous, kind-hearted man and a really good boss. And as the ghost of Christmas past takes him into the place where he once apprenticed at Fezziwig's shop, it's again on Christmas Eve, and Fezziwig has ended the day of work for everyone, and everyone who works for Fezziwig is a part of a party. And as Ebenezer Scrooge stands there and watches the party taking place, he can see his past self dancing and laughing and talking and having such a wonderful time that it appeared as though he had lost himself in the joy of the moment. We also learned that Ebenezer Scrooge was madly in love, engaged to a woman who had absolutely stolen his heart and that was everything in the world to him. And each of these memories, as they built, though they were shadows of the past and distant, they were so warm and so good and so meaningful for him. They just filled his heart. But then the journey continued. And as the journey continued, the story began to change. And the story changes when we hear once again from his fiancée who says, Ebenezer, you've changed. You've replaced me with another idol. And that idol is gain and greed and envy. And I've watched Ebenezer as those nobler aspirations that used to make you the man that I have grown to love and adore, they have fallen away one by one by one until you are nothing but a shadow of your former self. And even though she loves him as deeply as she loves him, when she gives him the choice, you must choose either me or your selfish motivations and need for gain. Ebenezer's choice is clear and it's definite. And no matter how much they love each other, they went in separate ways. As the journey continues, we discover that Ebenezer's sister, Fan, she died in childbirth, leaving one son, Ebenezer's nephew, who we met for just a moment last week, a nephew that Ebenezer did not have a close relationship with and was pretty distant to. At this point, Ebenezer Scrooge is overwhelmed by the journey. He wants it to end, and he tells the Spirit, I've had enough, please no more. And the Spirit says, there's one more stop that we've got to make. And the ghost of Christmas past takes Ebenezer to a home that's not his, but as they enter into the home, he can see his fiancée there. His old fiancée, the woman he loved so dearly. And she's surrounded by children. It's Christmas Eve, again, 7 years prior to this Christmas Eve night. And as the children are playing and laughing, in walks a man, her husband, their father, and he's bearing gifts. And it's this moment of tremendous joy and love and celebration. But for Ebenezer, it's a moment where he recognizes what he had lost and what he had given up. And as if that wasn't enough, after everything had quieted down and the children had their presents, the father, the husband, turns to his wife, Ebenezer's former fiancée, and he says, I saw Ebenezer Scrooge tonight. I walked past his office, and even though it's Christmas Eve, he was there in the dark, alone, counting his money. And he was so very, very alone. He was there even though his partner and best friend, Jacob Marley, was on his deathbed at home. Well, that memory just crushed Scrooge. He couldn't take it anymore. And the story tells us that he went to the ghost of Christmas past and he took this hat that he had and he just pulled it down over the ghost as hard as he could because he wanted the ghost to go away because he couldn't take it anymore. And he pulls the hat all the way down over the ghost and light fills the floor and the ghost goes away. And when the ghost goes away, Ebenezer goes to his bed and he falls into it and he falls into the deepest sleep that you can possibly imagine. I've had this sleep before. Maybe you've had this sleep. It's the sleep of absolute emotional exhaustion, where sleep just takes you and you just fall into it so very, very deeply. You know, this ghost of Christmas past is such a powerful image for us. Because the ghost of Christmas past and the journey that it takes with Ebenezer Scrooge reminds us so much of our own journeys when we revisit the past. Some of the memories we have are so blessed and so full, and they fill us with such life that even if they cause a tear to form in our eyes, it's a tear of happiness because of the blessings and joy that we remember. But sometimes the memories that we have of our past, they're hard and they hurt, and they remind us of things lost and people lost and hopes that we had and who we thought we would be and how the world would end up. And some of those things aren't as we saw them or hoped them to be, and we're just disappointed. For Ebenezer, he saw the joy that was once his, but he also experienced once again the deep pain, the kind of pain that changed everything for him. Sometimes for us, as we journey through our past, that's our experience. The memories may just be shadows. The voices may sound distant, but nonetheless, they have a deep impact on our experience of the moment. One of the things that occurs to me is just like Ebenezer Scrooge experienced this powerful moment of memory on Christmas Eve, there's something about the holidays that make memories often more profound, more impactful. Sometimes during the holidays, because of the season that it is and the songs that we hear and the traditions that we have and the things that are so important, sometimes it magnifies the joy of our past and our memories. But sometimes, because the season is what it is, it can be really hard. It can highlight for us things that hurt in a way that may hurt differently throughout the year, but right now feel more powerful and more present and more difficult. One of the things that I want to say to you, if you've ever been in that place or if you're there right now, regardless of the reason, regardless of the cause of your pain or your suffering, it's okay. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of our journey. It's a part of our story. You're not broken. You're not doing it wrong. It's just where you are right now. And I wish there was some magical word that I could say to make it easy and make it better, but this is a powerful, powerful season. And it impacts us in a lot of different ways, especially when the world outside these doors is filled with glitter and tinsel and singing and songs and images of happiness and perfection and joy. And we think, hey, wait a minute, this is supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. But sometimes, for some folks, in any given year, it doesn't feel like that. But what we learn through the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, I think, is a truth that's important for us to remember as we take our own journeys, is that our past, even the painful parts of our past and the broken parts of our past and the hurt, that's all of our story. It is who we are, and it makes us who we are. And as Christians, we understand, at least up here, we understand that the power and perfection of this season isn't the superficial happiness. It's not the tinsel and bows and all of that stuff. What we understand the true joy of this season to be is the hope of redemption that we have in Jesus Christ, this baby who is about to be born, that has the power to change everything, even defeat death for us. We know that that's what this season is about. Even if we know it up here, though, it doesn't always mean that we feel it down here. There's this moment in Jesus' life where he says something so profound to his followers, and I think he says it to us even today, and it's something that we revisit every time we gather around this table. And it's something that reminds us of a very important aspect of our faith. And I want to share it with you, even though you're very familiar with the words. I want to share it with you as it's found in the 22nd chapter of the Gospel of Luke. When the hour came, he took his place at the table and the apostles with him, and he said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer, for I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he said, take this and divide it among yourselves, for I tell you that from now on I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And then he took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. This moment is so important for our faith. In this moment, Jesus is gathered with his disciples, and he's giving them final instructions. And what he does in that moment of final instruction is he takes bread and he breaks it, and he says, this is my body broken. Don't forget that, he says to them. Remember it. Remember it. As often as you take of the bread and drink of the cup, as often as you share communion with one another, remember that a big part of this story is broken. Broken body, shed blood. Don't forget. You know, sometimes as a people of faith, I think we have this temptation to focus on all the wonderful parts of our faith, and I can totally get that because the story of Christmas is such a meaningful, sweet, blessed story. The story of God coming to live among us in the form of a child, it's absolutely beautiful. And then, at the end of Jesus' life, there is the story that's equally beautiful, another rebirth where the tomb is empty and death is defeated and we are given life forever. Who wouldn't want to focus on those two parts of the story? And sometimes that's our temptation. But what Jesus says to his disciples as he's gathered around that table with them for the last time, he says to them, don't forget that redemption isn't possible without the broken part too. And in the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, as he goes back and revisits his past, we are reminded that he can't find redemption either until he owns and accepts every part of who he is. For good and for worse, all of it make him who he is. And all of us are the same. There's not a perfect one among us. We have broken pasts and we have broken hearts. We have blessed memories and amazing things that have happened to us. All of that makes us who we are. As we continue this journey toward Christmas, my prayer is that we'll take the fullness of our story with us. Every bit. All the shadows of our past, good and bad, joyful and painful. And that we'll recognize that in even the most broken parts of our lives, and sometimes specifically through the most broken parts of our lives, that's where the greatest hope is to be found. Because if Christ can overcome the brokenness of his body and defeat death, we have hope. And we always will. Even if it doesn't always feel like it down here. Next week, the journey of redemption is going to continue for Scrooge. Another spirit is going to come. And he's going to visit Scrooge, and that spirit's going to visit us. And that spirit is going to bring a very powerful message about what the next step toward redemption can look like, not only for Scrooge, but for us. It truly is a good news story, and I can't wait to share it with you. Amen.